Hi everyone, today let's solve a Leetcode question called set matrix zeros. So given M by M matrix, if the element in matrix 0, want to set the entire row and column to 0. Now let's illustrate with example here. For example, in here, we have 0 in the mid, right? So I want to set this entire row to 0 and this entire column to 0 to get this resulting matrix. And after that, we check here's example 2, right? So for example 2, we have 2 0 in this matrix. Let me draw it out here. We have 0 here, and we 0 here. So I want to set this row to 0 and this column to 0 and this column to 0. So get this resulting matrix. Okay, now finish that, the intuition. Let's think about how to solve this kind of problem. So I'll first write the algorithm and I'll explain the motivation for this algorithm. Okay, so let me write the algorithm here. The first step we have to consider is to flex for top row and bottom column, so we can update it later. So let's write it out. The first thing is to flex for top row and bottom column, so I use this abbreviation. And second thing is to mark the non-top row and bottom column. So I write it out here, non-top row and bottom column. And third thing is to update the non-top row and bottom column according to the mark. I'll write it out here. And the last thing to update is the top row and bottom column. Okay, let me explain with this example 1 here. So in this example 1, the first thing to consider is to flag the top row bottom column, right? So we need two variables. One variable is the first row is 0, but initially we want to set this one as false. And the other variable is whether the first column should be 0. So this will also be initialized as false. Okay, now we have initialized these two variables. Let's check if there's a 0 cell in the top row bottom column in this matrix. And we check, okay, the top row knows 0, the top column also knows 0, so we just skip this step. Okay, so we skip this step. And then we check the non-top row bottom column, which is this part. Is that 0 in this part? Okay, we found 0 in here, right? So we found 0 in here. We want to set the leading element of this row to a 0. So let's use a different color. We want to set the leading element of this row to 0 and leading element of this column to 0. Okay, now finish the mark side. Let's check the updates in the third step. So for updating the non-top row and bottom columns, we are using the result from the step 2. So step 2, we see, okay, the leading element of this row is 0. So we want to set this entire row to 0, right? So let's use a different color. I want to set this entire row to 0. So this will be 0. And same for this column. The linear element is column is 0. So we want to set this entire column to 0. Okay, now finish the third step. Last, we have to check the fourth step to update the top row and bottom column according to this flag. But we see this flag are both false, right? So we just skip this step. Okay, so let me write down. We skip this step and we are done, right? So we see the resulting matrix is same as the expected result. Now finish the first example. Let me use the drawing to show another example where we do need the flag. Okay, so now we have come to our second example. And again, we're starting all the way from the beginning to the end. So step 1 to step 4. So for the first step, we want to check is there 0 cell in top row and bottom column. We'll check here. Fine, okay, here for the first row, we had 2 0, right? And for the first column, we also have this 0. So we want to set both of these elements as true. So we just cross it out and set it to true. Okay, so this one should be true, and this one should be true, right? And now finish the first step. Let's use a different color for the second step. The second step, we want to mark the non-top row and columns. So we want to see is there 0 cell in this part. We see there's no 0 cell for non-top row and bottom column, so we just cross this out. Now we are checking the third step. Okay, so third step is to update the non-top row and bottom columns. We want to see is that a leading element. for non-top row and bottom column, here we have no, right? Here we have no, but here we have 0 here. So I want to set this entire column to 0. Okay, so change this to 0. And now we're done this step. We just mark it here and we want to check the final step, the top row and bottom column using our flag. And you see our flag here, both one is set to true, right? So we want to change the entire first row and first column to 0. Just change all this one to 0 and all this one to 0. Okay, now finish this step. Let's check the result match. Okay, you see the result match, right? This entire row should be 0. These two columns should be 0. Okay, we are done. Now finish the explanation. Let's dive into the coding part. Okay. To explain later, first we have to initialize some variables, then run these algorithms. The first initialize is the length of matrix, right? So let's say the total number of rows is the length of matrix, and the total number of columns, the length of matrix, with index 0. And after that, we want to set two variables. So first variable is the first row 0, to be initialized with false. And the first column 0 variable should also be initialized as false. And after that, we want to iterate each cell and mark for non-top row bottom column and flag for top row and bottom column. Let's write it out here. And we have to update the non-top row bottom column and also the top row bottom column. So just write coding command here. And finally, return the matrix back. Okay, now let's finish coding comments. Let's actually write the coding stuff. The first thing is to traverse the rows. So just use this function, and also the columns. So just use this function. And okay, we found the matrix row column is equal to 0. Then what to do? If it is first row, so if row equal to 0, then we have to set this flag as true, right? Is true. And the first column, this means we have to set this flag as true. Okay, that's this one. That's true. Otherwise, it means it's non-top row and bottom column, and we have to mark the leading element of that specific row and column to 0. Set matrix row 0 equals matrix 0 column to 0, right? Okay, now finish the flag and marking part. Let's actually update the cell according to our flag or mark. The first thing, we want to update the non-top row bottom column to our flag. So while traversing all rows except the first row and all columns except the first column. And okay, if found this condition, I mean the leading element of the row or leading elements of our column is 0, then we have to set all elements in this row and column to 0, right? Putting it like this. And we are finished updating the non-top row and bottom column. Now let's updating the top row and bottom column. So first we'll traverse the top row. So if row is 0, okay. If this flag is true, then we have to update the entire top row to 0, right? Set the top row to 0. And then want to traverse the top column. So okay, if the first column is 0, then I want to set this entire column to 0. So just write it out here and change to 0. And finally return the matrix. But first, let me quickly check if there's typo in the coding part. Okay, good here. This one is good. This one makes sense. Well, now let's submit the result to see it works. Okay, you see the runtime capacity memory usage of this solution quite efficient, and overall the coding part, although a little bit long, it's very easy to understand. Okay, I hope my explanation and the coding will help you, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.